we're saying it, because you say the bullets, but it's like, yeah.
No,
So I don't know how we do that with.
well,
They're out of luck.
House audio. Microphones coming through. Sounds all good.
All right.
Oh, two, sorry. Two.
Ah, we got three, four.
there, and then it's like, a lot of, we don't talk about it. Shoveling traffic in 20 years.
You guys watched this session or was it last year or was
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, did you have one last year?
Yes, sir.
Virtually?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering if I had this presentation.
last time Chris was on? Yeah.
It was 2 years ago when Lizzie Walker.
Yeah,
was
that's
kicking
right.
it off. We just kind of had our first meet and greet. We talked about it. Is that something we want to talk about? Maybe this is something that's been half baked. It's been in the oven for quite some time.
Yeah. It is big.
Yeah. It should be at the bottom of the Zoom menu.
Back here at the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, so the deal is.
Okay, if you go to the sheet, you go to the screen for sharing, it's at the top.
Back.
So if you're sharing the projector screen, it'll be at the top of the screen. You can hover over it.
If you're not using, that's the thing.
You got one.
You're there. Yeah. Otherwise, we speak on the microphone.
That was a cool on the speakers.
It's still a church.
Jonathan, Elmer's, I've seen your name all over the place. You're good. Take your hand. So do you do the same kind of things with Rob?
Rob and I are on the graphic side. Cameron from WSP, Cameron Manley.
Cameron?
Yes.
Rob and I quite a bit. So you've been a great help to us on MicroSimulations.
Great, great. But we did a presentation at KSBE. And it was surprising how diverse the crowd was. You know? Here we are in transportation, so I just figured we might see a bridge structure guy show up for this thing.
Not sure.
You're not the structure.
Tyler Mills.
Okay. Locker? Okay.
Video design. Trying to get into some traffic simulation. Just being presented like explaining a little bit.
Well, great. Great. I mean, that's something we can talk about. Is, microsimulation is used in a different variety of ways. Some of it's just different performance. What we're going to talk about is performance. Just going to make great pictures. So,
What I'm talking about later too. Not 3D model.
yeah, there you go.
During
Well, in West Virginia, visualization. That's microsimulation.
Nice.
Yeah, so visual stuff.
Yeah.
That's how they're.
We've done some stuff with our visualization, but kind of like faking, like taking the traffic but not tying it directly in just yet. Just we're not there, so at least faking it enough to where it sort of looks like. what the
I'm
data
doing
is.
the introduction.
Well,
You're doing our, like, video.
Yeah, I don't, so I didn't give you much guidelines or anything, so I'll just briefly introduce you guys.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I can do background.
I'm Rob.
We've done some where we
Ryan's
don't want to
doing-
give them a unrealistic idea.
Rob.
That's what we call it.
Either we or he and I.
Well, in there, we start talking about.
Ask him, I know this 1 hour has the extra 10 minutes. It's the odd 15 minutes.
Oh,
The rest of
right.
it, 40 minutes. Okay.
Just
Just
this.
Just, yeah, it's just the first one.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, no, it's just the first session in the morning is 50 minutes and everything else is.
Okay.
It's very strange.
Okay.
I was pointing to Taylor Kelly.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I can give
So-
you all a heads up.
So I think we can, yeah, we could, as soon as Scott's ready. I'd say.
Yeah, unlike the plenary session, we had all of our in-person guests here in the first 2 rows.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. This is the Wednesday 8 o'clock session that goes until 8:50. This session is on standards for microsimulation models. Our speakers today are Adam Hedges with HDR, Robert Frazier with HDR, and Scott Thomson with the Transportation Cabinet. Well, ready.
Well, good morning to everyone. Because it does make a difference being able to hear everybody. Thank you for attending today's session on microsimulation. This process has been ongoing for almost 3 years. Last time we had an in-person presentation was about the kickoff. And today we're delighted to be able to show some of the final recommendations that are coming out of our process here. HDR has been part of this process since its beginning, and we enjoy the opportunity to work with them. Microsimulation is a neat program and is catching on like wildfire. How it gets applied does make a difference as to what level, degree of detail do you drill into the process. If you're only using microsimulation to demonstrate a future representation of a geometric model, it's not as important. However, if you're in a public involvement and you're trying to demonstrate how traffic flows today, you're really going to have to cross your T's and dot your I's. There's a myriad of softwares out there, and we focused on 2. Those two being VisSim by PTV and Transmodeler by Caliper. Caliper's product, Transmodeler, is now linked to HCM7, so it's making itself more and more aware of it being a usable and powerful tool. VisSim doesn't need that introduction. It's been around for a long time. But being designed in West Germany, it doesn't always fit how people drive and behave in the United States, and specifically for Kentucky. Today, we're going to share with you some of the process, the earlier steps, and the results, not to sway you to use one or the other, but to understand that if you use one, certain things are going to need to be reviewed and not just simply default. With that, I'm going to introduce Rob Frazier and Adam Hedges. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Get the all right. I am hopeful that the Zoom part of this is working, and if someone isn't hearing that, they're communicating that back to us. I don't see the blue light on, but I'm going to press on. So we are at the end of the process of developing these simulation guidelines, and the work is complete, and so we're really excited to be able to present this. The standards, these are the topics we're gonna cover in the next 30 minutes here. What is modeling, microsimulation modeling? Why, where, how do we use it here in Kentucky? Why do we need these guidelines? And what's in the guidelines? And I will just say that the next one, most important to me, is how can these help you? Like, why are these useful? And then how can you get access to the files? And then we're gonna have some training coming up. And so Adam's gonna cover those later things here in a little bit. But the what, microsimulation, and so Scott talked about this already a little bit, it is really zooming down to the individual driver level. So you look at the behavior of individual drivers. It's not the big picture of how much traffic is on a link, but individual drivers. And so you replicate the behavior of the driver of a car, of a truck, a bus. You can do bicyclists, you can do a pedestrian. So how do people interact with each other as they drive on streets and highways? So why, where do we use it? We use it for making decisions. That's one of the primary and most important reason we use microsimulation, is because it can evaluate things that are otherwise very difficult to evaluate. So complex situations, think of a complex freeway weave, or a situation where there are lots of different interactions with closely spaced signals. So it answers some of the questions on the right, and that's why we use simulation. So why is this important? And then Scott mentioned the two software packages that are typically used here in Kentucky. There are many others, but these are the two that are primarily used in Kentucky: Transmodeler and VisSim. So those are the ones that are addressed directly in the guidance, though you could apply the guidance to other software packages. But that is the main focus. And then why do we need Kentucky-specific guidelines? Consistency. We want to have consistency across different models. We want to improve our accuracy. So consistency, accuracy, and then to streamline the process, to make it easier to set up models, to use models, to test different alternatives. So those are the three main reasons that we think we need guidelines here in Kentucky. And I'm going to go into a little bit of kind of what led. Well, I'll tell a brief stories. There were a lot of discussions about some particular models that were being generated. And so those questions led to discussions with the cabinet, both on the planning side of the house, the design side of the house. Hey, maybe we need to bring some additional consistency to what we're doing here, because different people do things in different ways, which the next slide demonstrates. We took 10 fully anonymous VisSim models. Just kind of gave us models. We didn't investigate anything about them other than we looked at the driving behaviors, acceleration, deceleration, the speeds, vehicle speeds, lane changing, vehicle composition. Those first 5 things listed on the left there. We looked at how people change those parameters within VisSim. And as Scott mentioned, it was developed by PTV out of Germany, and they have a defaults, and those defaults are, in their words, meant to be changed. They are not, many of them are not really defaults, they're placeholders for you to then put in more accurate information. But we looked at those things, and as you can see, the gray here shows that some were unchanged. The green is things that were changed but were within the values, the Kentucky values that we have in the guidance, and then the red is our models that used values outside of that range. And then the bottom, vehicle routing, is a little bit different in that there is the 2 ways to do set up VisSim models, origin, destination, and point to point, and they're about 50-50 for these models between those 2. And so if you look at Model C and Model E, they were done in different ways, using different sets of parameters, ranges and things. So the team that developed C and the team that developed E likely have a kind of a different philosophy about how they set up their models and how they calibrate them. And so we want to bring some consistency to that part of the process. And then if you look at just 2 of the rows, lane changing is one of those things that when we met with PTV, which we did a couple of times in this project, they said, yeah, the values that are in there for lane changing are just meant to be changed. We don't expect anyone to use them. And most of these models didn't have those values changed. And that doesn't, I will just pause to say, we didn't know anything about the context of these models, the time allowed, the purpose, the budget. So in no way is these are necessarily right or wrong. It's just that they're different in ways that maybe we can bring some standardization to. So I do want to emphasize that there are many models that get done in ways that these models have been done, and they're used effectively. But we think we can just bring it, improve it further from where it's been. So then the vehicle routing, again, the guidance encourages the use of origin destination. Though again, we didn't know the point-to-point definitely has a role in model development, and the guidance points that out as well. And so these are just ways that things are different, and that we want to bring some consistency to them. And then when we looked at the transmodel, we did the same thing with transmodeler models. They were much more similar. As you'll see, our guidance document ends up agreeing with many of the values that are set up as true defaults in transmodeler. They are based on research and intended as a starting point, many of them. And and there weren't a lot of differences here, but our guidance uses some of those things as a starting point. So that's not necessarily inconsistent with what we found. All right, so there are many other states with guidelines. Ours is in process. And those guidelines have a lot of different attributes. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Adam to talk about some of the other guidelines and what's in them, what's in ours, more important.
Yes, so you can see in this table that this is just the values that are kind of the different things that are discussed in the guidelines that we reviewed. So to start this project, and this is kind of the first presentation we gave, was really probably a literature review of these documents, but a lot of these states have different chapters and different sections, and all of which have different use cases. And we kind of like that certain states had pretty much everything across the board. And so we really wanted to include that in the Kentucky guidance. So, so all these sections are in the Kentucky manual. We wanted it to be kind of comprehensive and cover the whole modeling process. And really the difference in our project really to other guidance documents is the kind of detailed look at the parameter values and the parameter ranges. So kind of highlighting that, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But even the other states that kind of do provide parameter ranges and values, they're just kind of based on a kind of test and see in the model. And we wanted to kind of use Kentucky specific data and field observation data to create these ranges. So it's kind of a new thing in this document and in this project that wasn't really done before. So this a little bit is a reiteration of what I was just talking about, but this is the way the guidelines are laid out. This is the cover on the right, but those are the 8 chapters. So it kind of follows along with how you develop a model from, I guess, the purpose and background of the entire manual and the project, but then kind of walking you through modeling and kind of getting down to the results and documentation at the end. I wrote most of this manual, so I guess I would tend to think that a lot of it is important, but if you were only going to read 3 chapters, probably chapter 2, 3, and 5 are the most valuable. So 2 would have all the pre-model development materials, so the scoping, the data collection, the analysis tool. So what is the right method of going about getting data and doing the traffic analysis, and how in depth you need to go. And then chapter 3 is kind of the model development best practices. So walking through some of the kind of common inconsistencies that are shown in models and trying to iterate a kind of best practice method of doing that. It isn't a here's how you model 101. It is more of a troubleshooting section. And then chapter 5 being kind of the highlight of the discussion of those parameters that we analyzed and developed. So kind of going a little bit deeper into the parameters. If you guys have kind of been tuned into this project as we've been doing it, you've probably heard us talk about this, but go ahead. We collected drone data and used trajectory analysis for this project. So we collected drone data from 8 different locations across the state, but these 3 kind of highlight that. So this is an interstate in northern Kentucky on 75, and then an intersection in Paducah, and then an interstate here in Louisville as well. So we were trying to collect data across the state to try to provide kind of a variable data set that kind of captures the entire driving population. So we were getting freeways and arterials, and so we were just kind of collecting drone footage of a roadway as it's nearing or tapering off of congestion conditions, and then pushed it through analysis software that is able to track the vehicles as they go through the frame. So we use that to do a lot of the analysis of the 9 different parameters that we looked at in this project. This is just kind of a one slide could summarize, I don't know, half a year of work. It would be this, I guess. And so these are the 9 parameters, just at a very quick glance, but and kind of the results we have from looking at them. So graphs are naturally better than words or tables, but this is just kind of a quick snapshot of the results of these parameters and the resulting ranges. They're more detailed in the guidance document itself. And in addition to, I guess, the guidance document, these ranges will be kind of located in these additional files. So the seed files being one. So if you are to start a new microsimulation project, you could open up a seed file and start from scratch that way and have all these recommended Kentucky parameters preloaded in there, or if you already have an existing model file, you could import them in. So this just kind of builds a way to quickly incorporate the Kentucky parameters without manually having to code them in. Would also improve kind of consistency and reliability of that. And then number two is a kind of cheat sheet to the parameters. So all the results in tabular format in an Excel file, that'll be attached to kind of where the guidance is kept online. And so that'll be available if you need to kind of look something up quickly. And a couple of the tabs are actually interactive. So programming vehicle fleet mix and stuff like that. And then there'll also be kind of a calibration and QC checklist just for users, kind of as you're getting down to the chapter 4 and chapter 8 material. So that's kind of an overview of the guidelines document at a high level. It's right now kind of under final QC review. It's somewhere between 95 and 100% finished, and we're waiting to roll it out here soon. Kind of after we do this training that I'll get into and at the end. But this section is really probably the most impactful to people who are in the modeling world and people who are a little outside of it, but adjacent maybe, and just how can these guidelines help you? So okay.
Great.
We're going to attempt to look at the chat without corrupting the entire. Audio is missing.
I think that was right before this started. I think that just got clicked on. There, check up there.
Is the audio still missing to anybody on the Zoom?
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Okay, cool.
Did I mess it up?
I think
No,
I
you
think
can
we're
tell.
good. Yeah, everybody said they can still hear. So
And I'm gonna, just one other thing that Scott was mentioning, Adam, is when you were going through that list, I think you said something like that the outline for the guidance document, that there are separate chapters for the two software packages. I think you mentioned that, but I just want Scott, we just want to make sure that everybody understood that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I mentioned it, but yeah, there are separate sections for Transmodeler and BISIM, both in the kind of model development section and the parameters section. So they're separated so that if you are working on a Transmodeler project or a BISIM project, you don't have to read through all the stuff for the other software.
exactly, right.
Might not be.
Yeah, so it's intended to be user
Yeah,
friendly.
we tried to make this with the point of using it and not an academic document that is difficult to read. Engineers have never encountered something like that, I'm sure.
So back to how can this help you? That is the goal.
Yeah, so yeah, moving back to how can the guidelines help you? I'm just going to kind of run through 4 or 5 different bullet points that we kind of came up with regarding that. So the first one is traffic project scoping. So this is kind of for anybody doing this type of work, consultants, KYTC staff, modelers. The guidelines, the first section of the guidelines are really to help you do this type of part of the project easier. It's giving you ways to kind of set up your data collection, how to scope the project in terms of level of effort required for the type of analysis you need, what type of software you should be using. So let's say you just have a few intersections or you have a freeway corridor that you're looking at for safety purposes or something. Do you need to do a full microsimulation analysis of that? And so there's an actual software selection tool. There's a list of all the softwares and how they can actually be applied within the document. So this is kind of where, if you're not in the traffic world, it seems like it's a little bit of a black box. Like, well, there's 8 different softwares you could use. Like, why are you picking one versus the other? And there's typically a reason for that. And so we're trying to outline that in the guidance manual to make that process a little less just up in the air or mysterious in a way, I guess. But I guess an example for us at HDR, we were working on a project in Lexington on I-75, I-64 kind of split corridor there, and we used both microsimulation, so we made BISM models, and we used FreeVal, which is more of an HCS tool. And we did this really because, for a few reasons, I guess. The BISM model was important because we wanted to look at specific weaving movements, different lane configurations, different lane expansions, and kind of the specific distances between them. So looking at that vehicle interaction level information that you kind of can't see from HCS or FreeVal, they just kind of give you a color rating and a level of service, but you don't actually know if that's working the way you intend it to. And then the other piece is the interaction between the freeway network and the arterial network. So at the interchanges, are the ramps going to queue? Is there queuing on the arterial network trying to get on the ramps to get on the network? So looking at those two things was a kind of an important piece to us. So microsimulation is really the only tool that can look at both of those combined in one file instead of creating separate files and trying to kind of merge the two worlds together. So a second, I guess, way that they can help you is just in model development. As we were talking about, there are chapters in the guidance manual discussing just methodology of best practices, which we've reviewed with PTV and Caliper, discussed with it over the phone, sent them drafts of the document to review, and they've kind of provided feedback. And so they are kind of the best practices for coding certain things, generating different types of control, intersection types, and just setting up the model. So it provides you with a little bit of information on that. But then, as I kind of talked about with the seed files, it also gives you all the parameters we're talking about without you having to manually code those in. So instead of just opening a blank file with all the default settings, you can open one of these and then do a save as or import all the data in if you already set up your whole model and you're like, oh, I just want all these parameters pulled in. I don't need all the other stuff. So so just the general model development. And I guess here it also talks about like the importance of data and data collection. So that's kind of both in the project scoping, but also the model development. And one of the things we wanted to highlight was kind of the importance of traffic data. Volumes are really a critical part to any of the traffic analysis that you do. And so a lot of times what we are working with are maybe an hourly flow network, but for microsimulation and detailed analysis, we really need it in like the 15-minute kind of flows to see how does traffic peak throughout the hour, how does traffic peak throughout the day, and modeling it that way, not modeling it based on the 7 to 8 hour is 500 cars, but what is the 7:15 and what is the 7:30, and how does that peak change? So if we just look at a graph here, like we just had the hourly data, we would kind of be led to a different conclusion about how much traffic is being pushed through a network and how it's arriving there, versus if we had like the 15-minute data, it's showing a different story and it's showing potentially a worse traffic condition.
We put this in as just one example of, this is just an example that the guidance kind of brings out this issue. It does this with several other topics and issues too, to kind of say, as you're developing your model, be thinking about these things and get the whole team on the same page and everybody thinking about things in the way that's going to be most advantageous for the projects. So this is just one thing that comes up on every project.
The next kind of topic would be calibration. So calibration is the likely most difficult part of creating a model, microsimulation modeling, and what do you calibrate to? what are the external or existing conditions you're trying to calibrate to? And then also, what are the calibration targets? What do they mean? What do they represent? And so we're trying to provide kind of an overview of that. There's a lot of documentation on that by FHWA, and we kind of pointed that a few times, but the FHWA guidance, the revision is very detailed and is looking for a really robust set of data, set of days, creating a representative day, and doing a lot of different types of analysis that is not really that familiar to a lot of us, but the guidance is looking to just kind of provide some potential targets, some areas to calibrate the model to, and tries to highlight the idea of calibrating to the target that you're trying to actually analyze. So what is the goal of the project you're doing? If the goal is related to reducing congestion or relieving queuing, you might not really want to exactly calibrate to just travel time. It would be important for you to calibrate to queuing. It would be important to calibrate to maybe delay at intersections and things like that. So selecting the correct calibration targets, and then what some potential target ranges for calibration would be. And so just as an example, we did some pilot projects using some of those files that Rob was talking about earlier. So we just took a few of those models in both Vissim and Transmodeler and ran them as they were, and then cleared all the kind of driver behavior attributes and all the work that was done by the people making the models, and then threw in all the Kentucky defaults, and in some cases threw in the actual software defaults, reran the models, and tried to look at what we were getting. And so in general, most cases, the Kentucky defaults ended up being pretty good, but not as close as the developed model, which is what you'd expect. But in this case, just from looking at the travel time, our Kentucky defaults are in the green on the right, and the original model is in the middle, and then the baseline data is on the left. And so you can actually see that from a percent difference standpoint, if you were to just, in theory, use the seed file that you'd be given and then and create the model and run it, you'd be closer in most cases than the actual submitted model. So yeah, in this exact example, it could have saved the modeler a ton of time, and they could have just tweaked some of these at the very end to get it a little bit closer instead of kind of recreating it from their original model, which is the goal. Again, this was just an observation, not really a critique. It was just thinking about, do these defaults actually help get us closer, or are we just kind of, I don't know, blowing smoke about it? So, and then the next step would be kind of model QC. So once you've kind of done the initial first three steps, now you're in the process of making sure your model makes sense and making sure everyone is in agreement with what you've created. So we provide some information on that in the guidance document. There's also a QC checklist just to try to help you go through and check through the model. And this would actually be something you could either fill out or you could print and include with your kind of model report, so that people reviewing the model would know, like, okay, this person is QC this in this way, check for all these things. And in addition, if you're using kind of the Kentucky default parameters, that would also streamline the process. It's less checking. Someone can just, oh, look, they used all these parameters. We know what those are. People are generally agreeing with using those. Let's just go ahead and move forward. So, and then at the end, this is kind of the end goal that everyone wants to have. The whole point of creating a model is to try to inform decision-making and try to kind of create better project decisions and move projects forward. And so by doing this and creating kind of a guideline, everyone's working in the same general area. It's improving the model consistency. So what you're seeing model to model and what your expectations are. And it's also kind of creating an avenue or a forum for discussing how to model and what's coming out of it. So yeah, it's establishing kind of the expectation of people who are and aren't familiar with modeling of where it should be and what the results should look like. So yeah, this is just another example of some of the parameters that we looked at and developed. So these are the vehicle speed ranges. And you can see, like, just as far as the model consistency goes, the default values, I'll pick on VISM in this case. Like on the 45-mile-an-hour one on the right, VISM would only allow the speeds to vary from like 44 to 48 miles an hour. So not sure how many of you have driven on a 45-mile-an-hour road, but that's not really how most people drive. So our project kind of looked at speed data throughout Kentucky, and obviously we've developed two curves for urban and rural that show greater dispersion data both on the high end and the low end, and this kind of creates more variability in the model, but improves like expectation for what you'd actually incur. And so using these types of things, if people were to use them across the board or something similar, would help kind of improve the model consistency that we'd expect it to kind of recreate real world conditions. So that's just kind of a quick overview of those 5 bullets there. But I guess the next big thing is how can you get the files and participate in the training? So how do you actually use this guidance and how do we move it forward? So we're planning to do training virtually toward the end of this month. So we're trying to set it for the last 2 weeks of September. People online and people in the room can certainly help with the scheduling of that, because we want people who are interested in this topic and who are doing models to attend that and to give us feedback. And then the guidance document and the seed files and the other items that I mentioned earlier, again, are very close to being finished. And so sometime this fall, in the next month or so, I don't know exactly when, it should be available for use and download moving forward. So for the training, if you want to scan this QR code, it won't pull up a drink or eating menu, but it will take you to a doodle poll, hopefully. And in that doodle poll, we're kind of asking for feedback about when to schedule the training session. So we're hopefully going to do 3 training sessions. This is where the doodle poll gets a bit confusing, to be honest, but I'm trying to get a lot of information with one kind of shot out there. So if you have a chance and you'd like to fill out the doodle poll, please do. Please list your email in the name category. And then for the availability, there should be 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of September, morning and afternoon sessions. Just check your availability for that. And then this is the most confusing part, but we're looking to have 3 sessions. So if everybody's interested in all 3, that would be amazing. But I imagine if you only do VISM modeling, you're not interested in attending a 2-hour training on Transmodeler. So there are 3 full days at the beginning of the doodle poll. I think it's the 16th, 17th, and 18th of September. If you would just check the ones you're interested in terms of the general microsimulation guidance, that would be the first training session. And then the VISM specific training session being that 2nd day, and the Transmodeler specific one being that 3rd day. This isn't related to when we'll schedule them, but it's just kind of gauging interest and trying to set the schedule accordingly. So if I see a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm interested in the general and the Transmodeler, and I also see that those people are available at certain times, obviously we'll try to accommodate that as best we can. So yeah, that was a ton of information for a online survey, but I would appreciate it if you could at least attempt it. And if none of that makes sense, then just feel free to email me and I will try to help you out. we're also going to send probably this link to some of the people that were initially invited to the first meeting we had on this project. But I don't want to leave anyone out that might not have been there. So
All this training will be virtual.
I think that's all we had for today. If there are any questions, I can try to look at the chat box online as well.
Questions?
There's a question online, but I couldn't make it.
I think he was asking when is the guy that's gonna be available? Oh, it was right. I think it came in right before you said that.
Okay. Yeah, so the manual should be available. Again, like I said, it's kind of in the final QC process now, but should be available soon in the next couple of months, I would imagine. At the training, certainly if you are attending that, or if we have your email, we could update everyone once it's online. So. Yep.
So you mentioned it with the speed profiles, but for most of the parameters, do you have like a different set between urban and rural, or like a congested downtown type of area or interchange?
Yeah, so I would say maybe half of the parameters have an urban and rural differentiation. Some of them, like standstill distance, for example, has 2 profiles for urban and rural, whereas like time headway doesn't really. So it does kind of depend on what the parameter is. I guess if it has that differentiation, the more we've thought about that, we tried to think about that as we were doing this. And some of it is, so for headway, for example, the way that people are in car following. So like when you're following the driver in front of you, you likely drive pretty similarly in no matter what the conditions are, but you're probably only doing that in congested conditions. So I guess that leads to, will you have congested conditions in a rural setting? Enough to model, I'm not sure. So we tried to observe that with the drone footage and make the parameters accordingly, but I guess we're trying to give overall guidance. So if you were doing a rural project, let's say, and you thought, well, these are a little too tight, and if you had any reason to change them outside of the recommended ranges, then that's something that certainly could be reviewed. But yeah, it's about half and half, I guess.
I think that's an important point. The guidelines are not meant to completely limit. They're meant to give parameters, a range of parameters, and then I fully expect that there will be models that go outside of those parameters at different points and reasons that are totally valid. Just, but what we wanted to bring some consistency to that. Then, yeah, I will mention also that if you are starting a project and like to get access to the seed files, Scott, it's your contact. I mean, they have everything, and so that it's, you know, the time is now. If you've got I think someone's already using it. So just put that out there. They're available. Just now, I guess Scott is on.
Now we're in our final phases of reviewing the guidance, and just want to make sure that our management is also on board with what is being shared with everybody. These are guidelines. They're starting. They're not necessarily the end, but this way, depending on the software you're using, we've provided fairly good guidance for this end and transmogger. We're not making a choice between the two. We're not dinging either one. We're just saying if you choose to use this one because you're most familiar, these are the areas you need to pay attention to. And if you're using this one, these are the areas you need to pay attention to that. The old guide, the whole is, regardless of which software, we're gonna get a similar result. There's some nuances to everything, but these will give us a nice starting point. Nothing will ever replace good project-specific data.
Yeah.
And those give you the permission or the support to vary from where these seed files might have you start. Documenting your work is paramount. If we can't reproduce, if somebody else can't reproduce your work, it's not defensible. So one of those things that we're also working on in another project is creating an appendix to that study or to that design project that that tells the story of how the data was collected, what data was collected, and how the model was developed. Telling that story makes it much easier for all of us to be able to defend it in public or in peer review. Any more questions? I really do appreciate everybody's attention here. Let's give HDR a hand.
Thank you. That would be great.
Yeah, it's a. Next year, maybe we'll have more in-person attendees. It's sad to be here. It's great to see everybody, but we don't see everybody.
Just on the up screen. So you have to scroll that on the top.
Stop sharing.
Adam, I got a question. This may be more specific there. You can get that in and you set your little X on it there. Yeah, get that. How did you all use that on the screen? Scroll across the screen, going out,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
number of times to observe it.